Hi everyone, I'm Yasha, and welcome to another episode of Election Scoop. Today, we'll be discussing our preview and predictions of the elections that will be held next Tuesday, November 5th. There are many elections, so if you just want to hear about your state, there will be a timestamp in the description below, and you can just fast forward to that spot. First and foremost, if you're a little confused about elections happening now, I'll explain. Most people won't actually be having elections on Tuesday, since the federal elections, those for President and Congress, are held in even number years. However, when it comes to state elections, each state decides when to elect its own governor and legislature. And 5 states have set their election days as next Tuesday. These states are Kentucky, Louisiana, Mississippi, New Jersey, and Virginia. Now, there are many hundreds of individual legislative and local races on the ballot, and there isn't enough time to cover every single one of them. So I'll just go through a very brief overview of whether or not anything is expected to change in each state. Going alphabetically, we start with Kentucky. Kentucky is only electing its executive officers, meaning governor, attorney general, secretary of state. The Kentucky governor's position is probably the single most hotly contested race tomorrow. The incumbent governor is Republican Matt Bevin, and he was elected in 2015. Before Bevin, Kentucky had a Democratic governor for 16 out of the last 20 years, but Kentucky fast became hostile to Democrats on most levels of government. But Andy Beshear, the current Attorney General, might change that trend, at least temporarily. Beshear, as Attorney General, serves in an elected position, and so he has almost as much name recognition as Bevin does. Polls have been all over the place for this race, with one poll finding Beshear up by 16 points, but another one finding the two in a virtual tie. Regardless of what happens, this race will determine whether or not the Kentucky state government continues to have an undivided GOP majority, or if there will be a division of powers for at least the next 2 years. On that subject, the Attorney General race is another key one to watch. Democrat Greg Stumbo, who is running to fill Beshear's old position, will face off against Republican David Cameron. But, of course, all the races are important to follow and vote in. Next up is Louisiana. Louisiana will be electing its executive positions and its legislature. Here's the thing, though. Louisiana, unlike a vast majority of states, has a blanket primary, a top 2 system where all the candidates from all the parties are on the same ballot. That round, the first round, was in October, and a majority of legislators and people who are running for election won an outright majority in the first round, meaning that those elections are over. However, in some races, no one candidate won a majority, including that of governor, which means that those races will be held on Tuesday. Speaking of the governor's race, the current governor, Democrat John Bel Edwards, is seeking re-election. He's a moderate to conservative Democrat and the last Democrat left as a governor in the Solid South. Edwards was elected for his first term in 2015 against the scandal-ridden opponent, Republican David Vitter, and has had a fairly successful but uneventful 4 years in office. Now, he's running for re-election, and it looked for a while like his opponent, the first-place Republican, would be Representative Ralph Abraham. But on primary night, a businessman named Eddie Risponi just barely inched out Abraham for the second-place spot, and now he is facing off against Edwards. Now, the whole GOP, including Abraham, now sides with Risponi, but many voters who are undecided may decide to lean towards a well-respected incumbent, Edwards, as opposed to a relatively unknown dark horse candidate like Risponi. Most nonpartisan polls do have Edwards leading, but his lead has decreased significantly since the beginning of the campaign, and now he only has a few points worth of lead that can very well be erased by Election Day. Also worth noting is the race for the Louisiana state legislature. The legislature is controlled by Republicans, but they do not yet have a supermajority, 2/3. But many conservative Democrats, who make up the backbone of Louisiana politics, are either retiring or not looking very strong in their re-election campaigns. So we'll see if the GOP will be able to gain a 2/3 majority. The GOP currently controls 25 out of the 39 seats in the state's Senate, meaning they are only 1 seat away from a supermajority. In the state house, the Republicans controlled 60 out of the 105 seats, meaning they have a slightly harder time needing to gain 10 seats, almost a tenth of the whole chamber, in order to gain their desired results. And we will be watching earnestly to see if that happens or not. The last state that is electing executive positions is Mississippi. Mississippi, as I'm sure most people know, is a pretty Republican state. But on the local and regional levels, there are still many conservative Democrats who can make or break competitive elections. The Mississippi governor's race is one of them. The current Attorney General, Democrat Jim Hood, is running for governor. Hood is the last statewide Democrat elected in Mississippi and won re-election in 2015 by a comfortable margin of more than 10 points. But polls, at least the newest ones, show him lagging by around 5 to 10 points in the governor's race behind the Republican candidate, Lieutenant Governor Tate Reeves. It is still a competitive race, at least by Mississippi standards, but the GOP definitely has a pretty significant advantage. Down ballot, the GOP is highly likely to win all the other slots like Secretary of State and Commission of Agriculture, in addition to Hood's old spot as Attorney General, meaning that after these elections, Republicans may control every statewide office in Mississippi for the first time in pretty much the state's entire history. One other special thing about Mississippi is that in order to win, a gubernatorial candidate must not only win the popular vote, but a majority of the 122 House districts in the state, which most political pundits see as something that it will harm the Democrat Hood even more. Next up is New Jersey. New Jersey is only holding elections for its General Assembly, the lower house of the legislature, not the Senate or any other statewide race. Democrats already control slightly more than 2/3 of the 80-member General Assembly, and they will want to defend that from the GOP. It is highly unlikely that the Republicans will have any shot at taking back the New Jersey legislature, but they can deprive the Democrats of their 2/3 majority and therefore strengthen the GOP position in New Jersey politics. Finally, the last state holding elections is Virginia. Virginia is probably the battleground state in this election, even though it is only holding elections for its state legislature. The GOP controls both houses of the state legislature by one vote, 21 to 19 in the Senate and 51 to 49 in the House. Since the lieutenant governor, who breaks Senate ties, is a Democrat, gaining one seat in the Senate would take back Democratic control, and 2 seats in the House are needed for Democratic control. Still, many pundits view only a few seats as having likelihood to switch, since most Democratic targets went blue 2 years ago in the 2017 election season, which turned out to be a massive benefit for the Democrats. While it looks like the Democrats are indeed on the path to control both chambers, it all depends on how many people turn out to vote. That's really what all elections are based on, the principle that people will get out and decide what happens in their democracy. So to conclude, if you live in any of these states, it is imperative that you vote. No matter where on the political spectrum you stand, voting is the way to make your voice just as equally heard as the other millions of people who are casting their ballots on Tuesday. By participating in democracy, you are completing the vision of the founders and putting the destiny of your nation in your hands. So as always, thanks for watching, and remember, don't forget to vote.